What is going on, everyone? Welcome back to the World According to Briggs. Today, we're going to look at some facts about the homeless in the United States. For some reason, a lot of people think that only California, Oregon, Washington, and New York City have homeless residents. They have more than most, but they don't have them all. No state is immune when it comes to having a portion of their population living on the streets. A lot of things go into how a state gets a higher homeless population. It's not just the state or city's policies or politics. Those are a big part, don't get me wrong, but you also have to look at the climate, economy, population density, and the cost of living. All these things play a factor in putting people on the streets. There's a government agency that deals with the homeless issues in the United States. It is called the United States Interagency Council on Homeless, or USICH. The USICH is an independent federal agency within the U.S. executive branch that leads the research and the implementation of the federal plan to prevent and end homelessness, from their website. Anyway, every year they come up with the stats on how many Americans are living on the streets or in their car or whatever. We're going to rank each state by the number that they actually have that are considered homeless as of last year. We will also include the percentage of the nation's homeless that each state has. Wait until the end because these numbers get crazy. All right, let's take a look. Number 50, Wyoming. Wyoming gets cold and it is sparsely populated with no real big cities, so of course they're not going to have many homeless people. The study found that they only had 548 homeless residents in the entire state. The share of the nation's homeless population Wyoming has is 0.1%. 49, North Dakota. North Dakota, a lot like Wyoming, it gets cold and it doesn't have a lot of people. Fargo's one of their only big cities and it's just not that big. It's very cold. North Dakota had 557 homeless residents at the time of the study, giving them 0.1% of the homeless population of the United States. 48, Delaware. This is the first shocker. Delaware's not a big state, but they do have Wilmington and some other cities that are legit cities, and Wilmington's a nightmare a lot of the time. You'd think that they would have a lot more, but no, they don't. Delaware, at the time of the study, only had 921 homeless residents. I find that one hard to believe, giving them 0.16% of the homeless population of the United States. Number 47, South Dakota. The Mount Rushmore state doesn't have a whole lot of homeless. They don't have a whole lot of people in the first place, and then they just don't have a lot of them that are living on the streets or in the prairies or whatever homeless people do in South Dakota. At the time of the study, they only had 995 homeless residents, giving them 0.18% of the homeless population of the United States. 46, Rhode Island. Rhode Island, here they are. I figured they'd be kind of low. I mean, they've got Providence, which is a decent-sized city, but it's just a very small state, so they're not going to have a bunch, so I guess this one doesn't really surprise me. Rhode Island has 1,055 homeless residents, giving them 0.19% of the homeless population in the United States. 45, Vermont. Again, Vermont gets kind of cold. They don't have the biggest cities, and they don't have a ton of people, so this one makes sense. Vermont only had 1,089 homeless residents, giving them 0.19% of the homeless population. Number 44, Mississippi. The Magnolia State shocked me on this one. Mississippi is one of the poorest states we have in the Union. You would think they would have them everywhere, but if you figure in the fact that land and the cost of living is dirt cheap here, kind of makes sense that even someone on a really low income could afford to rent or buy some property here. Mississippi only reported having 1,184 homeless residents. The entire state. That one's kind of hard to believe, giving them 0.21% of the homeless population in the United States. Number 43, Montana. Now, you could start to see a pattern here. Other than like Mississippi and Delaware maybe, these aren't very populated states at the beginning of this list. Montana's a perfect example. They don't have a lot of people, and they don't have a lot of homeless. They only had 1,357 at the time of the study, giving them 0.24% of the homeless population. Number 42, West Virginia. This one, again, is a lot like Mississippi. They've got some serious unemployment issues, and you'd think a lot more people would be homeless. But then again, the cost of living and the cost of housing is extremely low in the mountain state, so you could pull it off at a very low income, I guess. West Virginia reported having 1,397 homeless residents during the study, giving them 0.25% of the homeless population in the United States. 41, New Hampshire. New Hampshire and Vermont are always next to each other in just about every stat, and they're not too far apart right here. New Hampshire only had 1,396 homeless residents, giving them 0.25% of the population. 40, Alaska. Alaska it's a unique state, obviously. It's out there by itself, up there with Canada and Russia and the Bering Sea and all that. And they don't really have big cities. They got Anchorage, Fairbanks, and a bunch of smaller cities. And it's a huge state. Not a lot of people live there. So, of course, they're not going to have a big homeless population. I tried to research to find out if they counted any of those people that are living off the grid in the woods there, and I really couldn't find any numbers on that. Alaska had 1,907 homeless residents, giving them 0.34% of the population. Number 39, Maine. I thought they'd be higher on the list. It's a pretty well-run state, so they have a lot of programs and stuff to keep people off the streets if they need it, and it's not terribly populated, but it can get really cold, so that probably keeps their number down pretty low. They had 2,106 homeless residents, giving them 0.25% of the population of homeless people in the United States. Number 38, Idaho. Last time I was in Idaho, I did see quite a few people live in their car. I shouldn't say quite a few. 3 or 4 cars with maybe 2 or 3 people living inside the car or the van at rest stops and things like that. And they were legit living in them. They weren't just passing through. But I still thought they would be earlier on the list. I didn't think they'd have this many. But they have 2,315 homeless residents, giving them 0.41% of the population. 37, Iowa. Iowa has the exact same numbers as Idaho. Again, not very populated. It can get cold. Don't have big cities. They don't have a bad economic situation in most of the state, so that helps keep their numbers down. Iowa had 2,315 homeless residents and 0.41% of the homeless population in the United States, just like Idaho. Number 36, Nebraska. I like Nebraska. It's a little slow and it's a little boring. They don't have really giant cities or anything like that. Omaha and Lincoln, Nebraska are only considered big cities if you actually live in Nebraska. Every place else on the planet and the country consider them small cities. But Nebraska only has 2,365 homeless residents, giving them 0.42% of the homeless population of the United States. Number 35, Kansas. The Jayhawk state right next to Nebraska has very similar numbers. They had 2,381 homeless residents at the time of this study, giving them 0.42% of the homeless population of the United States. Number 34, Arkansas. This one's a lot like Mississippi. Their cost of living is really low, so is their housing prices, so this helps keep their homeless population kind of low. This is a state that doesn't have the best jobs, or in some cases, not many jobs. But they're still number 34 here. I would have guessed they would have been in the top 20 at least, but they aren't. Arkansas had 2,717 homeless residents, giving them 0.48% of the homeless population in the United States. 33, Utah. Again, this one's a little strange. I didn't think it would be here. I mean, they got good-sized cities like Provo and Salt Lake City, Ogden, St. George. But all in all, Utah's got a reputation for being a very well-run state. So it makes sense that they don't have a really high number, even though they do have decent weather and good-sized cities. Utah only had 2,798 homeless residents, giving them 0.49% of the homeless population. 32, Louisiana. Yeah, I would have thought it would be later on in this list. Louisiana got some serious poverty issues, and you would think that would land a lot more people on the street in this state, but like Mississippi and Arkansas, it's a pretty cheap place to live, so maybe that helps. Louisiana had 2,941 homeless residents, giving them 0.52% of the population. 31, Connecticut. Connecticut is a very strange state in more ways than one. And I've said this before, they've got some really run-down small towns and they got some poverty issues, but at the same time, they have a handful of the richest towns and neighborhoods this country has to offer. It's like the whole state is economically bipolar. They only had 3,033 homeless residents at the time of this study, giving them 0.54% of the homeless population in the United States. Number 30, New Mexico. I thought we'd have more here, but they're doing better than I thought they would. New Mexico only had 3,241 homeless residents, giving them 0.57% of the homeless population. Now, like I said, 3,241, it's not a high number. It sounds like it. 3,000 people living on the street in your state, that sucks. It really does. But when you see what some of the other ones later on this list have, you'll realize that 3,000 is not a big number. 29, Alabama. The Yellowhammer State is a lot like Connecticut. It has some really poor areas and some really rich areas. I guess all states do, but these two kind of have it at extreme levels. Alabama has some good-sized cities like Mobile, Montgomery, Birmingham, Huntsville. They have decent weather, no blizzards or anything like that. Their summers get a little hot. That's no big deal. And they have a fairly low cost of living. All these things spell out that they should have a much larger homeless population than they actually do. Alabama had 3,261 homeless residents, giving them 0.58% of the homeless population of the United States. 28. Oklahoma. Oklahoma has one of the highest percentage of residents that are on some form of public assistance, whether it's rental assistance, food stamps, whatever. And this helps keep their number kind of low. I mean, here they are at number 28, and they've got some serious poverty issues. You'd think they'd have more, but they don't. Oklahoma has 3,944 homeless residents at the time of this study, giving them 0.7% of the homeless population in the United States. 27. Kentucky. I thought this one would have more. I gotta tell you, I've been to Kentucky and they have some, I guess they don't have homeless. They just have a lot of poverty, people living in really rundown places, but they don't have a lot of homeless. Kentucky had 4,079, giving them 0.72% of the homeless population in the United States. 26. South Carolina. The Palmetto State doesn't have a lot of homeless people. Here we are at the midway point of this list almost. South Carolina only had 4,173 homeless residents, giving them 0.74% of the homeless population. 25. Wisconsin. The Badger State is at the midway point with their 4,538 homeless residents, giving them 0.8% of the homeless population. I think they'd probably have more if they weren't such a cool state. I mean, they're cold and everything's run kind of decent. I mean, I'm sure a lot of their homeless people are coming from Milwaukee, but they don't have a lot. 24. Indiana. When you got a place like Gary in your state, you'd think you'd have a lot more homeless residents than Indiana actually has. They're starting to get up there, but it's not terrible, again, compared to other ones on this list. Indiana only had 5,471 homeless residents, giving them 0.97% of the homeless population. 23. Virginia. I think this one's right where it should be, I guess. You got some good-sized cities like Norfolk and Richmond. They got a cost of living that's starting to climb at a pretty good pace, along with housing, so it makes sense. Virginia had 5,783 homeless residents, giving them 1.02% of the population of homeless residents in the United States. 22. Missouri. They call it misery, and I imagine if you're homeless here during the winter, it's even more fitting. Missouri had 6,179 homeless residents, giving them 1.09% of the homeless population of the United States. 21. Hawaii. The Aloha State has a reputation for having a homeless problem, and that's because they don't have many big cities, so they're all kind of concentrated in just a few places. So it seems way worse than it is. That's my opinion. Hawaii has 6,412 homeless residents, giving them 1.13% of the homeless population. 20. Maryland. I'm not sure what's going on with this one, but Maryland has the great city of Baltimore in it. And if you've ever been to Baltimore, you know there's more homeless people in that city alone than what this report said they have. That's my opinion. Again, filled with opinions. Maryland had 6,561 homeless residents during the study, giving them 1.16% of the homeless population of the United States. 19. Nevada. Nevada has some homeless residents, and it's sad. I've seen them. You could see them. They're on display there every day you go there. They're panhandling, whatever they could do to get by. And then you look at documentaries like the one about the people that live in the storm drains. There's a whole underground city of homeless people in Las Vegas. But we're talking about the entire state. And a majority of their homeless are going to be in Las Vegas. There's a lot of reasons you could end up on the street in Nevada, and not all of them have to do with gambling. Nevada had 7,169 homeless residents, giving them 1.27% of the homeless population of the United States. Number 18, Tennessee. Tennessee has some homeless. Mostly it's going to be in Nashville and in Memphis. The good news is most of them can play an instrument. I'm not even joking. Tennessee had 7,467 homeless residents, giving them 1.32% of the homeless population of the United States. 17, Minnesota. Yeah, I don't know if the Minnesota homeless residents got the memo, but it's not good to be homeless in extremely cold temperatures, and Minnesota is one of the coldest states we have. Minnesota had 7,977 homeless residents, giving them 1.41% of the homeless population. 16. Michigan. The Wolverine State cracks 8,000. As you can imagine, a majority of their homeless are going to be in either Flint or Detroit. And again, like Minnesota, this place can get brutally cold. And they've got homeless people living there. Almost 9,000, well, 8,575 homeless residents. Closing in on 9,000. That gives them 1.52% of the homeless population. Number 15, New Jersey. New Jersey is an extremely expensive state to live in, so it makes sense they got a lot of people hitting the streets here. But you'd think they'd have more. I mean, they're right next to New York City, and if you haven't figured it out already, New York is going to be in the top 5 of this list, and they're right next door. You'd think they'd have more, but they don't. New Jersey had 8,862 homeless residents, giving them 1.57% of the homeless population. Number 14, North Carolina. What kind of sick, twisted world does North Carolina have more homeless than New Jersey? That makes no sense. If you ever visit both of them, you'll be confused too. North Carolina had 9,314 homeless residents, giving them 1.65% of the homeless population of the United States. Number 13, Colorado. I've been to Colorado quite a few times, mostly the Denver area, and this one makes sense. I actually thought they would have more, but they're doing okay compared to what I've seen. Again, my opinion. The Centennial State had 9,619 homeless residents, giving them 1.7% of the homeless population of the United States. Again, not sure if this counts the people living off the land, dropped off the grid, or whatever. A lot of people do that here. Number 12, Arizona. You know, it's one thing to be homeless in the cold. That's pretty rough, but the blistering heat, it's got to be about as bad, in my opinion. Arizona gets hot, in case you don't know. Arizona had 10,007 homeless residents during the study, giving them 1.77% of the homeless population of the United States. Number 11, Illinois. I'm kind of shocked at this one. I mean, they got Chicago. At the rate people are flying out of Chicago, you think rent prices got to be dropping pretty quick. Illinois had 10,199 homeless residents, giving them 1.8% of the homeless population of the United States. Number 10, Ohio. Yeah, this is another place you don't want to be homeless because of the cold. Winters in Ohio can be brutal. You look at places like Dayton and Cleveland and Cincinnati, you got serious poverty issues there, so of course you're going to have some homeless. Ohio had 10,345 homeless residents, giving them 1.83% of the homeless population of the United States. Number 9, Georgia. Yeah, this one kind of caught me off guard. Every time I go to Georgia, it's nice, it's pleasant. You see a couple homeless here or there, you don't see that many. I was surprised that they had 10,443 homeless residents, giving them 1.85% of the homeless population. Number 8, Pennsylvania. I guess this all goes on in Scranton, Philadelphia, and Pittsburgh, because the places I've been to Pennsylvania, you don't see any of that. You don't see anyone living in their car, anything like that. But I stay mostly in the rural and small town areas when I go visit Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania recorded 13,199 homeless residents, giving them 2.33% of the homeless population in the United States. A little bit of a jump there. Number 7, Oregon. Now here we get to all the places that everyone thinks has a ton of homeless people, and they do. Most of Oregon's homeless are going to be up in Salem and in Portland. The rural areas have next to none of that, so it's just the cities. Oregon reported 15,876 homeless residents, giving them 2.81% of the homeless population. Oregon only has a little over 4 million residents in the entire state, so that's a pretty high number. Number 6, Massachusetts. Massachusetts has some places that got a fair share of homeless residents. A lot of it has to do with Boston and the Boston metro area and how expensive it is to live there. That's pushed a lot of people to the streets. I'm still surprised because they get some pretty brutal winters. You'd think they wouldn't have that many, but no, they got a good amount. 18,471 recorded homeless residents, giving them 3.26% of the homeless population in the United States. Number 5, Washington. So I've always heard, and I've seen the stats, that Washington and mostly Seattle has a ton of homeless residents. I live near Portland, and when I go downtown, I see tons of homeless. Washington apparently has it worse, Seattle being the main hub of this. When I was just up there 2 or 3 weeks ago, I was all over that city. I hardly saw any homeless residents. So, I mean, the numbers are right, and I know that. They're just not out in the open like they have here in Portland. I'm hoping that means they're in shelters, getting help, something like that. I'd hate to think they're just out living in the woods because they have a ton of woods around Seattle. I hope that's not the situation. Washington had 21,577 recorded homeless residents, giving them 3.81% of the homeless population. Number 4, Texas. Every time I've gone to Texas, I've seen quite a few homeless residents. It never gets brought up that they have a bunch of homeless, but here they are at number 4. They're a big state, and I get that, and they have a lot of people, but they've got some homeless, and nobody ever talks about it in Texas. I don't know why. Texas has 25,848 homeless residents, giving them 4.57% of the homeless population of the United States. Number 3, Florida. Yeah, this is another one. Every time I go there, I see a good amount of homeless people. The heat and the good weather brings them in. I mean, good weather when they're not having a hurricane. But Florida had 28,328 homeless residents, giving them 5.01% of the homeless population of the United States. Number 2, New York State. Obviously, large majority of the homeless in New York State are going to be in New York City. So it's almost like we could just talk about that. I'm sure there's a couple thousand scattered throughout the rest of the state, but a majority of them are going to be in the 5 boroughs. New York is number 2 for a reason. It has had a homeless problem for a very long time, and it's just getting worse. New York had 92,091 homeless residents reported, giving them 16.27% of the homeless population of the United States. And they're not even number 1. I guess we all know who number 1 is. All right, before we get to number 1, don't forget we have another channel called On This Day. There is a link down below. We would love it if you would join that channel too and see what happens every day of the year. All right, on to number 1. And number 1, California. Yeah, if you didn't know this was going to be number 1, I don't know what you read or if you watch the news or anything like that. California has a homeless problem that is epidemic level. San Francisco is just crazy bad. You go down to Los Angeles and you see some of the areas like Skid Row. It looks like something out of a post-apocalyptic movie. It's that bad. Have you ever heard the old thing where you're sleeping in the gutter? I've driven through there and people are literally sleeping in the gutter. Like half in the street, half on the sidewalk, right there where they meet. That's where they're sleeping. Like if a car tried to pull over, they would run someone over. And that's not just 1 or 2 people. That's all over the place. Skid Row part of LA is just sad and depressing, and I don't even think the officials know what to do at this point. It's gotten that bad. It is crazy bad. Now, a lot of this has to do with policy. A lot of it has to do with the cost of living. A lot of it has to do with housing and weather. All those things combined, Los Angeles, San Diego too, not as bad as Los Angeles, and San Francisco have all of those things, and it's just like the perfect cocktail for an epidemic of homeless residents. And it's too bad. These people need a lot of help, and it's really sad. California had 151,278 homeless residents reported. Yeah, 150,000 homeless people living in California. They have 26.73% of the homeless population of the United States. 50 states, they have a quarter of the population. That's just nuts. All right, that's today's video. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Hope you got some information out of it. It is kind of a sad subject, but I felt we should do it because when I read the comments and when I see other videos and stuff like that, they just make it sound like it is California, Oregon, Washington, New York State, and no other state has any homeless. Now, obviously, as we've seen, they have a vast majority of the homeless. I mean, way overboard, but other states do have homeless. All right, everyone, have a great day. Be nice to each other.